Hi folks, and welcome to today's buyer's guide, where we are talking about desktop computers and what you need to know and what you need to ask when you're buying your first desktop PC. So let's get into your tips for today. Hi folks, welcome to another Tech Guides video with myself, Colin, and today we're talking about the desktop computer. You can actually see one behind me over there. So first things first, like we asked when it came to a laptop and a smartphone, what are you going to be using that device for? Are you going to be using it just for home use? Is it for gaming? Is it for the office? What is its purpose? Because that purpose is going to impact everything else that you need to ask and the answers that you're going to receive as well. When you look at the PC in the background, you'll notice a few things. First of all, we have our system unit or our tower over there. Then we have our monitor. We've also got a keyboard and we've got a mouse. So it's those four components that make up what we call a desktop computer. So once we know what our purpose is for the machine, we need to now ask what sort of power do we need? In other words, the CPU and the RAM. How much do we need? And again, we have to go back to what we're going to be doing with it. Do we need an Intel CPU? Do we need an AMD Ryzen? What is it we need? What are we going to be doing with it? How much RAM do we need? Now, an entry-level desktop machine should have at least 4 gigs of RAM. But if you're going with like an Intel Core 7 processor, you should have around about 8 gigs of RAM. Now, one of the reasons I say this is because of some of the software that you're going to be using. Some software packages like the very latest Office packages and Windows would require you to have at least 8 gigs of RAM. So on the memory side, try and get a machine where we're now November 2021, you want to have at least 8 gigs of RAM. If you can have more, great stuff. Remember what RAM does. RAM helps the applications open quicker, right? It helps me move through the PC quicker. All the instructions that keep the applications open and various tasks, that's all done by the RAM. So the more you have, the better it's going to be. With that, you also want to ask, can the RAM be upgraded? When we go to the CPU, that's not something that you're just going to change and upgrade, because usually if you change the CPU, you've got to change the motherboard. So you want to make sure that you've got one that is going to last you for the next 5 to 7 years. Okay, it seems like a long time, but folks, it's worth the investment. So now that we've got the power sorted out, we've got maybe an AMD Ryzen processor because we're going to be doing a bit of gaming. We have at least 8 gigs of RAM, but we know we can upgrade that to like 16 gigs. We're now sorted on that side. Now we look at the space. How much space do I need? Now, the beauty of a desktop machine is that you can have multiple hard drives. So, for example, I've got a laptop that's got 2 hard drives in it. One is an SSD, which is about 500 gigs, and the other is a 1 terabyte traditional hard drive. Now, there are a couple of things around this. I want you to listen carefully. Number one, how much space do you need? Do you need 1 terabyte? Do you need 2 terabytes? What are you going to be doing with it? Once you figured that out, then you need to ask yourself, do you need a traditional hard drive, which is a little bit slower? It is cheaper, but just know over time it does get a bit slow. Or do you need an SSD drive, which is the most common drive out there at the moment? It is a little bit more expensive, but it's a lot quicker in terms of opening things, creating files, moving between applications as well. It aids in the performance of the PC as well. So I think where we are now, let's leave the old traditional hard drive and let's look at having a desktop that has an SSD drive in it. Now, have the SSD drive as your main hard drive. In other words, where your operating system and your programs are stored, all of that should be on your SSD drive. Okay, so for that, you can have a 500 gig and that's fine. Then make sure it has an additional hard drive of maybe 1 terabyte. Then all the other things can be stored there. You install your games and all those things on there as well, and that would be fine. So for the daily operation of the PC, everything is nice and quick. And as far as storage, you've got over enough storage. And bear in mind, with a desktop, you can still add external drives and things like that. So it does help. Then the only other real things you need to look at is what type of monitor are you going for? If you're going for gaming, what size monitor? Remember, we look at things like the resolution. We want to look at things like, screen size. We also want to look at how does it connect to the PC. What connector is it using? Is it using HDMI, a VGA connector? What is it using? With your keyboard and mouse, you want to look at, is it connected via USB? Is it a wireless connection? Those are the kind of questions you need to ask. And then probably the last two things you need to look at is what software comes preloaded on the desktop? What's the version of Windows? And is it a starter, home, or professional edition? And then is there any additional software like Microsoft Office? Is there any, maybe video editing software or anything other than Windows? What else is loaded on there? Because they'll usually tell you. And then the last item would be the ports at the back of the desktop. You want to look at the ports at the back of the desktop and ask them, how many USB ports are there? Is there a sound card? Is there a network card port as well? Does it take an HDMI connector? All of those type of things. So you want to make sure it has what you need. I can't tell you what it should have because by default it will have connectors, probably about 4 USB connectors. It'll have a network card port, it'll have a sound card, and it'll have your VGA connector. Those are sort of the basics. Anything else is obviously going to be specific to your particular needs. But folks, that should help you when it comes to buying your very first desktop. That should give you enough info to go in and make an informed decision. Ask the correct question so that when you pay those thousands of rands, you getting exactly what you want out of the deal. So I hope that helps, and I'll see you in another Tech Guide video.